Hello and welcome to another session of the Neota Network. My name is Max Paterson, and I'm the Global VP of Customer Success here at Neota. And I'm here to talk to you about how to identify use cases for automation in the automation space. So today we're going to go through a few sort of unique aspects of the legal automation space. So I'm just going to touch on those quickly. Then we'll jump right into, what are the greatest hits of where you can actually start hunting around for automation pieces, and then get into some tips. What to keep in mind as you're going through these use cases, as you're going through your automation journey, and where you can end up on as you go forward. So why don't we start with the legal space? So when a lot of legal services traditionally, especially, have been delivered interpersonally. A lot of legal services are still done that way. And whether it's passing physical paper between each other or providing advice, or, in the corporate environment, actually communicating directly and having the legal department, do things, a lot of the manual processes, when you're thinking of moving some of those into the digital space, there are a few things you've got to keep in mind. So first and foremost is that the law often deals with vulnerable people in unique situations that more for externally facing use cases, externally facing automation. It's really important to keep that in mind. Even some of the internal ones, when people come into the legal department or they're engaging with their lawyer, or internally you're trying to pass things, always remember that there's a person either kicking off the process, working in between the process, or going to be the end result or at the end of the process. So keep that in mind as you're designing the system, your user interface, the colors you pick, the language you pick. You really want to, any automation doesn't exist, or any product doesn't exist unless people use it. So when you're choosing your language, your colors, who your target audience is, keep that in mind, as that's what's going to motivate people to actually use the tool. Next up, also important and in the same line, is creating that sense of trust, that sense of credibility, that sense of empathy. These legal tools, once again, they don't get used, they're not real tools. It's really important to create that sense of trust, especially when you're automating things externally. If you want people to engage with them more and more, especially in the legal space, whether it's direct branding, whether it's very plain language or very approachable language, you want to create a space that the advice that they're getting or the information they're getting from this tool and engaging, or the documents they're getting from this tool, are credible and they build trust, and you're tailoring it to that audience. Lastly, and I'm sort of beating you over the head with it, but never lose focus that it's all about the people, and that's really a tenet of design thinking, if you've heard of that, or human-based designs, is that you have to keep the human in mind as you're designing these automation tools, or as you're looking for use cases, or as you're going through any design process, as that will be the people interacting directly with it. So really important as you go through, and especially important in the legal space. So automation, where do you start? So where are good places to start looking for when you want to automate? So the first thing that I usually tell people, and usually bears the most fruit, is what are things that take you 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, that when you look across practice groups, you look across teams, across offices, across regions, what are things that people have to comply with across the board? So a lot of this stuff is reporting. What are things you have to chase people for? What are things that internal policies that people don't comply with all the time? Why is this important? Well, one, usually these policies aren't just done for the sake of doing them. There's a result at the end. They provide data for you, insights. But if you have to keep chasing people for them, if you can remove that pain, if you can automate it a bit, even taking things that take hours down to minutes, or days down to hours, or even an hour down to half an hour, or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, those are big wins. That when you look at them in the aggregate, these are things that people will really jump on board with, and you're going to get a lot of success out of. So listening sessions are great for finding these if you're an innovation team, or looking at the internal policies, or I know it's a little bit crude, but going around and just saying, what are your gripes? What are the things you do that piss you off a little bit? What things do you want to focus on? What things don't you want to focus on? Let's take a look at those things you don't want to focus on and try and find automation there. A lot of good stuff in there. Next, start with documents. Documents are fantastic because you know the end result. Let's fill out this document. Usually they take quite a bit of time as well. And if you put them on the rails, if you start automating them, if you start using information you already have, or finding a way that you can streamline the way people access them, these are things that are going to give you better quality documents. You're going to allow you to audit them. They're going to allow you to leverage the data that are coming out of them. There's a lot of value to be brought through with documents. Something that we see all the time, especially in the COVID environment, as things that were done interpersonally have now moved digitally. Ton of document automation use case, ton of workflow use cases. So documents usually also aren't just about themselves, they're about the flow that moves through. So it's yes, create the document, yes, e-sign the document, but it's also about approving, and it's about having insight and auditing that process as you go through. So all things we can help with. So that's what the paper side of thing. The other part is look at the marketing materials that are coming out of your organization. Look at the blog sections of your website. Look at white papers, journal articles, press releases. Marketing is sort of a treasure chest of use cases because it's content that has been clarified by subject matter experts and sanitized so that it's relatable. And if the content and the page itself is relatable, it's so easy to transform that into a questionnaire or into intake forms or into document automation or whatever direction you want to take it, but the information is there. Usually really great materials that you can build upon. Next up, take a look at transition points. Those are points where things have to move, data has to move, information has to move, and it can always move more efficiently. So look at intake, onboarding, reporting, closing, offboarding. These processes are usually rife with not only paperwork, but information that needs to be transferred and communicated. So talk to the people that do these processes, dig in a little deeper. You're going to find a ton of automation use cases in there. And these ones are actually the ones you can get the biggest wins on in terms of time savings because, they're points at the relationship usually that take a lot of time. A lot of paperwork moves through or a lot of information has to be processed. So take a look at these. You can always streamline them more. Next, when you start getting these bits and pieces around, don't be afraid to zoom out and start aggregating. Once you get 3 pieces of automation and 3 pieces that are interrelated, you can have a self-service tool hub, or you can have a space that people know they can go to one place and they can start accessing these tools. And that's going to get you more usage. That's going to find more automation, more time saving in there as well. So as you start to find these bits and pieces, don't be afraid to start bunching them together because that's going to give you a lot more efficiency. And then as well, when you start automating or productizing these things, it's really easy to focus on the dollar amounts. It's really easy to focus on the big wins. But don't be afraid to start quantifying things in terms of time and effort that it takes to be put in either. I think what you'll find is as you start chipping away at these bigger processes, even these smaller processes, is that start evaluating things in terms of time and effort, start getting feedback on this, start looking at metrics. These are all things you can get through Neota Logic, but things that you can start thinking about earlier on that will give you that story when you have to start reporting on things. Finally, determine what a goal is. So as you're going through, you're looking for pieces of automation, don't be afraid to try and find the goal first. I want to solve X and then work backwards from there. You don't have to find the how yet. It's more important to find the why in automation or the what in automation and then work backwards at a solution because then you're going to find the most efficient solution that gets you to that goal. Goals also really help with building a team and getting people on board. If people understand where you're trying to get to rather than what you're trying to do to get there, they will come along that journey with you in order to get there. It as well makes things a lot easier to sell up to senior management or engage with other teams when you're trying to get them on board. So whether that goal is lead generation, get people more in the door, billable service, work on higher billable work, marketing opportunities. Sometimes it's as easy as I just want to do something cool so that we can leverage it in other places. These are all legitimate goals. If you keep those in mind, then you're going to find some of the more automated spaces that you can try and leverage. Common pitfalls. This is sort of important to keep in mind. So when you're trying to find what you're looking to automate, there's a few ways the few things that can do favors for you as you go through. So one, biting off more than you can chew. It's really easy to say, you know what? I want to find efficiency in reporting across all our offices and regions. That's great, and that's a really lofty goal to have, but I think that's a little tall order, and I'm sure the timelines you're working with are going to be a little longer than you expect. So try and go for the quick wins first. And once again, start looking at things in the aggregate. As it says here, don't try and boil the ocean. That's going to get you down rat holes. That's going to get you stuck in some of your thinking and some of your flows. Next, never lose focus, of the needs of the solution versus the wants. I think this is where you get into never-ending projects that you keep wanting to add features. This is a really good way to put things in perspective. Once you have your goal, you're working towards something. And if you've ever heard of the term minimum viable product, that's usually the smallest thing that you can build that achieves that goal, and only the smallest thing. And what that does is it puts the blinders on, it puts the focus towards that goal so you can achieve it, and then build from there, iterate. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's easy when you're starting to get momentum and show these automation pieces, or maybe you're getting more traction, for people to say, great, that's really cool. Let's add this, let's add that, let's add this. If you have a goal in mind and you're trying to solve it, you can keep that excitement, but you can also start building, okay, those are great features, great for version 2, version 3, version X going forward, but keep your eyes on the prize because you don't want to get stuck in the never-ending project. The last piece is validate constantly. So as you're working towards that goal, share it with people, show your progress, get buy-in from senior management or a manager on an ongoing basis, over-communicate. Because if you over-communicate, then people are going to be with you on that incremental journey, and they'll see you getting towards that goal, versus if you communicate at different points, the project could take you in a slightly different direction, which still achieves your goal, but the expectation might be that you're over here. So common pitfall, constantly over-communicate, constantly validate. Last but not least, wanted to give a few tips that just help you navigate this space, especially in the legal space. Be patient. Innovation isn't quite in the legal DNA yet, but it's getting there. And I think anything that moves from the personal into the digital is going to take a little bit of time. However, things are shifting very quickly. So be patient. Don't be afraid to explain things. And once again, bring people along your journey. Explain the why that you're doing it. Explain your goal as you're going through it. And you're going to find a lot of people are going to come on board. Make something. I can't state this enough. This is probably the most important thing along the journey versus finding the automation piece. Don't be afraid to make something. And we've got tools, our Canvas tool, our workflows tools. We're always building things that help you shape things towards physical or digital tools. That it's way easier to get people on board if they can touch and feel something. They'll actually feel part of it if they do that. An idea it's really easy for people to, go in one ear, out the other, and to give you sort of some feedback. If they touch and interact with something, they'll be able to give you better criticism, better feedback, and they'll be with you on the journey because they'll see there's progress being made. So don't be afraid to make something. Use the tools that you've got. If you got Neota Logic, Canvas is fantastic. That's exactly why we built it. You can build things really, really quickly. Workflows is the same. There's a whiteboarding feature in Workflows that you can actually be surprised at what you can get up very quickly. And don't be afraid to go lo-fi either. Take things to paper, have people sort of click around some fake stuff, but it'll get people engaged. Change the mindset a little bit. I know there's a lot of, in the legal sector, a lot of lawyer versus non-lawyer culture, but in the innovation mindset, in the innovation culture, in the automation culture, a lot of these use cases you'll probably see earlier on rely on people that are, support staff, a lot of the transactional stuff with junior lawyers, senior lawyers. It's the broad spectrum of everyone that you will find these use cases, and especially the ones where you can find the biggest wins happen everywhere. So be open-minded and include a lot of people. This is going to be a team sport, so get people involved in all sorts of people. And finally, find your passion. The best use cases I've seen are use cases that's something you'll use yourself, that you'll drive things a lot faster and you'll drive things a lot more efficiently if you understand the use case yourself. So don't be afraid to dive in and do something that you'll actually use. So my name's Max Paterson. If there's any questions you have, if there's anything else, feel free to reach out via email. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Neota Network sessions, and we look forward to hearing from you. If there's any other automation, feel free to bounce the ideas off. So enjoy the rest of the sessions, and thank you so much for joining me today.